Let's face it, business technology is frustrating and complex. So how do you make sure it works for your team? To make IT right, start the discussion at go-domain.com. You're listening to Discussions by Domain, a podcast for business leaders. Our discussions may be with people you've probably heard of before, but the majority of our guests are in the trenches, professionals like you and I, with the same challenges and struggles of keeping up in the Northeast. They're implementing strategies, overcoming hurdles. They're leading the fastest growing businesses in our region. My name is Anthony DeGraw, Director of Partnerships at Domain Computer Services, and the host of this show. When I'm not talking with business leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of Domain and the ups and downs of our own growth journey, as we intend to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show. So welcome to another episode of Discussions by Domain. Today I have the pleasure of introducing Anne Huntington. She is the Vice President of Business Development at Huntington Learning Centers. And today she's going to talk with us on the topic of the art of transitions. She has a very interesting story about the transition she's made in her career, leadership transitions from first generation to second generation, as well as business model transitions. And those are three very big transitions. I really hope we can get to a majority of those. That is my goal today. But Anne, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Anthony.
No problem. All right, let's jump right into, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you guys are up to nowadays at Huntington Learning Centers?
That's a very, very good question. So this is all about transition. So right now we are living and breathing transition at Huntington Learning Center. Huntington Learning Center is the nation's leading tutoring and test prep provider. We're located across the country. Our main office is in New Jersey, which is where I'm based out of. And right now we are going through a really remarkable moment within the company. We are a franchise model. So we are the franchisor, and we have franchise locations across the country. So that means individuals come in and then they open their own Huntington Learning Center, be it in California, Florida, Chicago, you name it. There's a need for this brand. So historically, Huntington was all company owned. We didn't start franchising. Then we started franchising in 1985 while keeping a segment that were company owned and operated. So right now we are actually refranchising our company owned locations. So 30 or so of those. Right now we've sold 11 of them, and we've actually sold some to our former employees, the center operations managers, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing right now in terms of a transition within Huntington, but there's so much more transition. So a little bit about who I am. It's no surprise, my last name is Huntington. And the name of the brand is also Huntington Learning Center. I'm the second generation of the founding family involved in the day-to-day of operation of the company. So we're going through a transition right now from the founders to the second generation. Yeah. And in family business, that's generation 1 to generation 2. So that's also really exciting because there's so much energy and there's so much fantastic transformation happening at all levels, from the people level, the processes, and the procedures. But prior to Huntington, a little bit more about me, I had a career outside of the family business. It was essential for me to have a boss who didn't have the same last name.
Yeah,
now,
I can imagine.
I don't call my parents mom and dad at work. I call them Eileen and Ray. Holidays, of course, they're mom and dad. So it was important for me to have a career outside of Huntington. And I had a career in the art industry. And business is business, regardless of what the actual industry is. And it was really a great way for me to hone in my business skills, hone in creativity, understanding how to produce, how to create, how to build. And now I can apply all of those skills to what I do day to day at Huntington. So that
Yeah.
was a lot. I think I answered the question.
Oh, that was great. And you did. So let's jump right into that on the topic of transitions. Talk to me a little bit about this 10-year career in art and how did that manifest? And what did that career path look like from someone who has no idea what an art career path looks like?
Yes. So, they say if you build it, they will come. So I studied art history and anthropology in university. I went to a liberal arts university called Colgate University in upstate New York.
Familiar?
And while there, I had internships, and I recommend to anyone who's listening that take the opportunity while you're in school to get as much experience as possible, because then you can apply it to whatever you decide to do after school. And you may realize that's not something I am interested in doing. So then you can pivot. So while in school, I interned at a museum, the Whitney Museum of American Art. I interned at a gallery called David Swerner, and I interned at an auction house called Phillips DePury & Company. Now it's called Phillips. After school, my first job was at Phillips, and it was before the recession. And then the height of the recession, I kept getting promoted, which was fantastic. And I also actually saw a whole business transformation because Phillips DePury & Company became Phillips, and it was acquired by a group called Mercury Group, who came in and reorged the whole company. They actually removed the department I started in and promoted me into another department. And then by the time I left Phillips, I was the marketing manager in terms of communication and press. So I had the opportunity to work with all of the different departments. So that was a fantastic experience because I learned so much in terms of business. I learned so much in terms of organizational structure, and I learned so much in terms of dealing with different team members and personalities. But while there, actually, I started my own company, which was a curatorial and production company, because within the auction world, there are cycles. It's cyclical in terms of the seasonality. So I started doing pop-up curatorial shows. Yeah. And this was the height of the recession. So I would knock on doors and call landlords and say, hey, can I put on a show during the weekend or for a week? Here's some money. And then I would build out the show. I would get the insurance. I would get the caterers. I would write the press release. I would get the artists. I would get the installers. I'd be there till 3 a.m., painting the ground or whatever had to be done. I did it all. And it was tremendously fun and tremendously rewarding in terms of building something out of nothing. And then finally that blew up really well. And I left Phillips and I did that full time. And then I started pivoting at that point and realized, I'm doing all this great work. And at this point, I was also working with some nonprofits and fundraising for those nonprofits. So to date, I've raised over $30 million for nonprofits.
Wow.
And then all of a sudden it started getting bigger and bigger. And I had a conversation with Ray and Eileen, my parents, and they were saying, would you take some of these skills? Are you interested in Huntington? And the beautiful thing about Huntington is it's the ethos of who I am. So everything I was doing outside of Huntington, I was helping all of these nonprofits. I was doing all this fundraising for fantastic organizations. And now at Huntington, I get to impact the future of this country. And we get fantastic results. So like on average, our SAT or ACT student will go up 226 points on the SAT and 5.3 points on the ACT. And last year, our seniors got about $57,000 worth of scholarship opportunity, which is fantastic. That was over 140 million system-wide. So what I'm doing now completely positively impacts the future, and it's ingrained in who I am. So it was a no-brainer to jump from what I was doing in the art industry and the philanthropy and the curatorial into education. but I was very strategic with that. So I started moving away from day to day. Some of the organizations that I'm still involved in, I went from being a consultant with them to being on their advisory board.
Okay.
So it was very transparent in terms of communicating with everyone I was working with, because those are relationships. And that's also, my personality in terms of, if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. So I was very strategic in pivoting from day to day in the art industry into education. And it now, looking back, it looks very seamless, but it was complex in terms of making sure that I did what I said I was going to do, and then also made sure I had time for me and time for everyone to deliver.
Very good. So I wanted to ask you the lessons you learned and how you transitioned into the family business, which you just went into. One thing that you did mention, though, that I want to point out, it was all the way back to your internships. And it sounded like you had 3 internships there. And from my standpoint, it looked like they were from different aspects of the art industry. And I would like you to just touch on maybe that and how that helps you transition into the franchisor, franchisee model and corporate owned model. And I think there's some, I don't know, I feel like there was something there where you getting the aspects of the 3 different aspects of one industry is allowing you to transition into the 3 aspects of your own industry that you're in. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yes. You're talking to someone who went to liberal arts school, liberal arts learning. So I understand connections and see connections. In terms of going back in the day to my internships, there are really 3 areas in the ecosystem of the art industry. So you have the nonprofits. So I wanted to get experience in nonprofits. So I did the Whitney Museum of American Art. This is not chronological. My first internship was actually at David's Werner. That's the second area. So that's the for-profit gallery, which can be primary and or secondary. And then the third component of the art industry is the auction house. That's the market of it. That's really the business. Now within there, you have different players. You have dealers who are solo or they have their own dealer organizations. You have advisors. You have independent curators. But those are the 3 main buckets: the nonprofit, the gallery world, and then the auction world. So I had the opportunity to test out all 3 of those. And not one or the other is better or worse. It all works together. And I worked in an auction house after college for years. How that transitions to Huntington, you can really see again that ecosystem of business and how does everything play into that business. So within Huntington, we are a franchise organization. So we're the franchisor, which means that we have to protect and grow the brand. We have to make sure that there are particular brand standards that are consistent across the system. And if they are not consistent, then there are ramifications for not being consistent. We are a business, and we have to make sure that the integrity of our business stays at the level it needs to stay at. And we are the best. Our revenue is 53% higher than our closest competitor. That's through our franchise disclosure document. So that's where, if you're looking in terms of the ecosystems of how different industries interact, franchising, it's a model that's a fantastic model in terms of being in business for yourself, but not by yourself. That's the slogan of franchising. And Huntington is a tremendous model to join because we not only are providing this entrepreneurial spirit for the small business owner who comes into the system, we're also positively impacting the community through educational services.
Yeah, no, that all sounds really good. As you transitioned, I'd like to now touch on the generational shift that you've been a part of and you're leading, right? So the transition from first generation leadership to now the second generation leadership. Talk to us about that and maybe some of the things uncovered throughout that process.
So family businesses are fantastic. I strongly urge that if it's a listener who is part of a family business to really think about joining before just pushing it aside. There's a whole industry of family business consultants, many of whom may just want your money and many of whom are really, really good. So
Okay.
you and your family have to assess where you're at and what makes sense for your business. So in terms of transitioning, it's not a light switch where you turn it on and off. I mean, Huntington Learning Center was founded by my parents in 1977. That's 42 years. Sometimes I equate myself to center number 17, which means that they had 17 children before me, plus my brother is not active in the business. So it's a very delicate dance in terms of a generational transition. It's also a very serious conversation and a serious endeavor. It cannot be taken lightly, and all parties have to be aligned and respect what the vision and the mission and where the business is going. So I am very fortunate that my parents and I are aligned and we know where we're going. We have a strategic plan, and that takes time. Of course, I want the plan to be executed even faster and stronger. And now I know that patience truly is a virtue and that we have to get on the same wavelength in terms of timing. And that's where these consultants come in and really help. In terms of the actual management structure, our organizational management team is shifting and changing, which is really exciting too. It does create a bit of disruption, but disruption also creates accountability. And just because I say something, maybe people will say, okay, well, what's actually going on? So what I've learned and what has really helped us in this transition is to bring third parties in to assess different areas of the business. Because first off, it's really important to assess your different areas of the business. It's also important to get an outside perspective, because sometimes if you're living and breathing it day to day, sometimes to step back can be a little bit difficult. So we have actually assessed many of our departments, and we're in the process of an entire IT transformation. We have a couple of meetings this week that are going to lay out some potential future states. And we've invested in these consultants to come in to really see, okay, well, what are our legacy systems and how do we keep what the secret sauce is, but make it even stronger and faster and more efficient. So in terms of generational transition, it's not overnight. It takes a long time. But the absolute key is to make sure that there's respect and alignment in terms of where you're going as a business.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that. And I think it's a credit to you because I have the same issue. Patience is what I really have to focus on. And I could understand from your perspective, but for you to understand that and then respect where your parents have gotten the business to and where they respecting where they seeing the ambition in you and where you want to get it to, that's absolutely unbelievable. And you use the word alignment, and we use that word a lot internally. And I think that's really good. So great work on that.
Thank you.
I'd like to go into the business model transitions now. So I'm going to let you completely take this because you know the transitions that it's been on. But what are some of the lessons that have been learned? First, walk us through that. And then second, what have the lessons been learned and why have those steps been taken by Huntington and yourself?
Yes. So we started in 1977. It's a brick and mortar company.
Yep.
And we started in the K through 12 area, and that's where we're at now. And we're still brick and mortar. From 77 to 85, we built up a system of 18 centers in New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia, the New York metro area. In 85, we knew that there was proof of concept, i.e. my parents knew.
Okay.
I was a baby, but there was proof of concept. There were operating manuals, there were systems, procedures, and amazing team, some of whom still are here today. Our tenure is fantastic. And we had the opportunity to scale. And how do you do it? You can go to market and you can bring in, finance guys in fancy suits. You can also bring in potential entrepreneurs who want to franchise. We chose the latter. We chose becoming a franchise company. So between 85 and 2008, we were on an upward trajectory. Then the whole sky fell in with the recession, and it hit everyone and anyone, and it hit us. But it also gave us an opportunity to step back and assess who we were at that point in 2008 and where we wanted to go. And this ties into how the model has changed. So by 2008, it cost upwards of $200,000 to $300,000 to open a Huntington Learning Center. And then the upfront costs in terms of our fees and structures had ballooned. They had increased.
Okay.
And the footprint was over 2,000 square feet, which is a fixed cost. If you are brick and mortar, you have to pay your rent every month. And then also our staff was full-time staff. Again, that's a fixed cost. So we looked at it and we thought, how do we move as many fixed costs either down or move them to variable costs? So what we did was we changed the footprint. And right now, on average, it's about 1,300 square feet, which is much easier to pay for rent versus 2,000 plus square feet. And we changed the staffing model from all full-time to some part-time, which again moved a fixed cost into a variable cost. We also slashed a lot of our fees. So now you can open a Huntington Learning Center for $100,000 to $200,000 versus the $200,000 to $300,000. And we changed some of what was mandatory in terms of curricula you had to buy and other forms and fees that made the price more expensive. So we looked at it in that way, and that's how we have changed. And then what we did was we don't just say it, we do it. So we created proof of concept and we opened company-owned locations, mainly in the boroughs outside of New York City, in this footprint with this staffing model to show that it works.
Okay.
And
very good.
Yeah, so everything we do, we test, we retest, and we bring in people from our franchise, from our system, to really make sure that there's proof of concept and it makes sense. Because we can invest in resources and procedures here at the main office, but if they're not adopted, then what's the point? So we have to make sure that there's a really strong, positive partnership between the franchisee and the franchisor. And then I came on board full-time about 6 years ago, and that's when we started talking about transition in terms of generational transition. I initially came on board as a consultant in a rebranding initiative, but everything I do, I dive deep, and I went into our training department, and I started working with the centers and visiting our franchisees and seeing what's really going on, and then I got in. I got hooked. So now part of the change is moving away from that company owning and operating multiple company centers, 30 plus is what we had, to a full-on franchise model. And that's our future.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you so much. And I think there's so many insights there on like how a business can iterate or evolve over time, and that you don't have to be stuck in this one model for your entirety, I guess, right? You can transition throughout all of these different models. You can test, you can iterate, and then you can bring to market what you've learned. And you starting 6 years ago and diving deep and seeing opportunity, because I bet that's what you saw, was opportunity as you started to look at these different areas of the company, and then saying and raising your hand and saying, hey, I think there's things that we could be doing here. That's outstanding.
Thank you. Thank you. It's what we do every day.
Yeah. Well,
to give every student the best education possible.
There we go.
Doing right by the student, you do right financially.
That's right. That's right. So that's the topic, transitioning through your career, through the business models, and through second generation leadership. I want to flip the script and go more into who is actually Anne, so the listeners can get to know you a little bit better. I'd like to start with, if you were to go back and give yourself advice to your younger self, let's say you're in the middle of this art career, what would that advice be to that individual?
The advice to my younger self would be relax. Less seriously, just have fun, relax, and probably slow down a little. You keep going and going and going, and all of a sudden you look up, you're like, oh my gosh, what did I just do? So I think I would tell my younger self to slow down a bit, take a breather.
I like that. It goes back to the patience thing you mentioned earlier.
Yes.
All right. What book or books have changed your thought process the most, or you have gifted the most to others?
The book, David and Goliath, is a very, very good book. I don't know if you've read it, by
No.
Malcolm Gladwell. And it's all about the underdog. And I believe in the underdog. I believe that, persistence and determination and grit and getting it done are more important than ego and saying, I'm this type of person. So I think David and Goliath is the book that I really live by. I just finished a book called When Things Fall Apart, which is all about Buddhist teaching, which is really good in terms of being grounded and thinking in terms of who are you and judgment and freedom. So those are two that come to mind.
That's awesome. We'll make sure Tyler links to those in the show notes so people can get quick access to them as well. And this question, actually, I'm glad I'm asking you this because you spent time in this world. What nonprofit or charity do you personally or does the organization support that you'd like to give some recognition to?
Oh, well, I wish we had lots, and we'll have to do another podcast about giving back and for good initiatives because that's in my backbone. One that comes to mind is the Coalition for the Homeless in New York City. Okay. I'm on their art advisory board for their main fundraiser, which is called Art Walk, which is happening this fall. So you can link to that.
Awesome.
We as Huntington, we do their project Back to School. So we do a drive in terms of backpacks and school supplies for homeless students so that they can start their year off with the supplies they need.
Awesome. Very good. We'll make sure to find the registration page for that so people can go take a look at that as well. My final question, Anne, for you is, who is a thought leader or a practitioner in the Northeast that you admire and think more people should know about? So this could be consultant, it could be somebody internally at your workforce, it could be somebody externally that you've gone and seen speak. But who is that individual for you?
There are so many. The first person who comes to mind is my mentor and my best friend, my mom, Eileen Huntington. I think what I aspire to and the thought leaders I look towards are women who've really paved their way through industries and who have really made a difference. They have gone in there, whatever the industry is, and have impacted that industry very positively. And I would say Eileen Claire Huntington is my thought leader or practitioner who I admire.
That's outstanding. Big shout out to Eileen. That's awesome for even thinking of this and starting this when she did. That's
with
great.
My dad. She did it with my dad. Yeah. He gets a shout out too.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So I would be hard pressed to not mention that we were able to connect, and I want to congratulate you one more time. I will be seeing you later this week, but congratulations on your NJ Biz 40 Under 40 award. That's outstanding. The work that you're doing at Huntington is amazing, and just keep it up.
Thank you so much.
So Anne, thank you. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, this is Anne Huntington, the Vice President of Business Development at Huntington Learning Centers. Anne, thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me on the show today.
To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. This guarantees that every episode will get delivered directly to your device. To help us get the word out, share with a friend, leave a review, and check out our discussions on the web at go-domain.com/podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.